Paul. I just let him in.
He's early. You get bonus points.
Hey, Paul.
Hello.
Your beard is looking great.
Thank you. This evening, it's the legend of the black bathrobe.
This is the Halloween edition, I think. We're trying to make this look like a Cramps video.
Well, you succeeded.
Got the special lighting. I don't have a. I need a
special. Yes. Good stuff.
Orange.
Good stuff.
No problem with these lights. It's hard to read my questions, but I can do it.
Oh, it's Jason. Hey, what's up, man? I'm fucking with you.
Oh,
Reverie says hi.
Going that way, huh?
Yeah, there you go.
Look like movie producers.
Yes. He wears the sunglasses at night. Oh my God. What closet? Where are you? That's an amazing background. I love the background.
We're here at Oasis Studios, deep beneath the Mount.
The bowels. Yes. Excellent.
Yes.
Deep in the bowels of Missouri.
We're here at the Greg Edmondson Memorial Black Box Theater.
That's Greg is where I got the idea when I almost threw him off the balcony because Reverie's like, I'm sick of this motherfucker. That's where I got the idea for the black bathrobe. Yeah, there's a whole story there. And who's the tall, silver-headed bartender, rock and roller, buddy of Jim McGowan's?
Brad Underwood.
Yeah, Underwood. I think Underwood handed down the black bathrobe to.
That's that bathrobe, Paul?
That's
you have it.
Well, wink, wink. Yeah. No.
There's like a secret hit team out looking for that thing. You better watch your.
Oh, I'm always watching my back. Yes.
They're gonna be helicopter and haloing down any minute now.
To get through all.
What's funny is Underwood denies it's his.
It is his.
But it's like it's for a 6'5" dude.
Right. Yeah, it's a 7 foot, long. Yes, the black bathrobe. Yeah, I had to do some.
And I saw him
tailoring.
wearing it in St. Louis. I mean,
I imagine you kind of got that overdone sort of almost Truman Capote vibe with it kind of overflowing past your feet and. I don't know why I picked up Truman Capote. I just
it is more of a shroud than really now at this point than anything.
I'm sure Truman Capote liked peach juice in his drinks.
Man, you just never
like Truman Capote always said, it's not who you invite to your Zoom, it's who you don't invite to your Zoom that really makes your Zoom. That's one of my favorite Capote quotes.
That should be somebody should do an updated version of that play where he's trying to Zoom everybody that last night on on New Year's and nobody's
right. Nice.
It's all told from that perspective of him and right in the camera. Huh?
Fuck. Whoever. I mean, I'm so feeling the Harry Houdini these days, though. On whoever said. Zooming is like a fucking seance. We're bringing that shit back. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? We're all just trying to bring the spirits in. Yeah. That's so. I guess what I'm trying to say without saying it is, I really love you fuckers. If I'll actually do one more Zoom, because I'm so. Yeah, it's got to be some good. I have to know. I'm gonna listen to some good shit because Zoom. Yeah.
Are you gonna give me a manuscript in 2021?
Yeah, anything you want.
Okay.
I'll stop putting 15 poems a day on 360. I love James, but okay, I'll relax. Get you some good stuff.
Hey, you can keep putting them out because we assembled our last book from all MySpace posts for Jacob Johansson. So we'll just pull everything from 365 that you put out in the last year, and we got a manuscript.
Cool.
And to tell you, Facebook announced today that they are taking down a lot of those old notes from years and years past.
Really?
They announced it just today, so we did it just in time.
Got in under the wire. Nice. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good. Yeah, the thing about my hellhole job is it's good bennies. So I've been 3 months now in and out of the psych ward. So I'm Zooming like 5 days a week with therapy groups, working on my breakthroughs. And I hope to ride that out till, I don't know, somewhere in the next year. Because if they'll pay you to not be there, I'm happy to sit in virtual Bob Newhart Zooms and talk with other people about their problems. So that's my current gig, and that's why you see a few more poems from me than maybe what I would normally have time to post. And if that doesn't work, there's electroshock, you know, so a lot of improvements with that. So.
I've heard good things.
Yes, yes. Your hair is so lustrous in that it wipes the lotions on its skin dungeon that you all are in. It's just, I can't stop looking at your hair, John. It's gorgeous.
I did just take a shower, so it's probably pretty smooth.
That's what it was. It's so silky.
It's freshly conditioned.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it from here. Yeah. I put a little mascara on my chest hair, so I tried to make that a little fluffier for the Zoom.
You gotta keep it pretty.
Yeah. Wow. That may be on my tombstone.
He kept it pretty.
Right. He was a pretty mess. But yeah, do what you got to do, and I'll be here.
All right. So let's see what this is. Okay, yeah, I already know it starts soon.
How's the weather, man?
Weird. We were still. I was still swimming. We were still 80 and 90 degrees until recently, but now we had a couple of days where it went in the shitter, and now we'll be back into the 70s and almost 80 for a couple of days. Then we're gonna have a couple bad weather days, but it just still better than most of the United States as far as temps. Not bad, not bad. You know, Ryberg, did you ever hear the story of how Duke and I, Jim Dukers and I, grew up like 2 blocks from each other? And we knew a lot of the same people and were the same age. But what ended up happening is this really rough, okay, so Alice Chalmers in Milwaukee was a major employer, whatever. The factory had 50,000 people. So they made an entire city called West Alice because it was right west of the Alice Chalmers factory building. And if you worked there, you know, they gave you a house and a note and you paid it off for the rest of your life. So it was a rough neighborhood, but there was a couple of blocks right there where Dukers and I lived, where the way it got cut off is we bust into junior high and high school that were straight out of a John Hughes movie, like Fountains on the Lawn, Millionaires. Oh, Daddy, get me another Porsche for my 15th birthday. And Jim couldn't fucking handle it and said to his parents, get me the fuck out of this because this is just too fucked up. Coming from kind of where we were, like on my block, there was 3 kids that were state champion wrestlers, you know, with the cauliflower ears and the sweet disposition. Very rough neighborhood, but we got bust in with the ultra rich, and Jim just said, fuck it. So that's how he and I somehow never met, but lived just a few. And then the point I'm revving up to is, and I went to the second Kansas City Throwdown, and we travel 50 years and thousands of miles to meet when we grew up just a few blocks away and had a lot of common friends. So that was kind of, if you'd never heard that story, that was a wild thing that the Throwdown did for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. He's a great guy.
Yeah, when I met Jim, he was, I don't know what he was doing, but he worked for the Pittsburgh Opera.
Really?
I don't know in what capacity.
Basso Profundo.
Yeah.
Poetry editor? No, probably not.
I just remember that he had more money than anyone else. We were trying to convince him to give Juice money to get a hooker.
Now, is there, oh, Reverie won't care. Is there a hooker story in every city with y'all? Because I saw one posted here recently. Is there some?
You're talking about the post about Matthew Haynes.
Oh, no.
Well, yeah, he, when Scott Silsby and Jason Baldinger first came to Indianapolis, Matthew, for some unknown reason, acquired them a prostitute. And he didn't tell them. So it was just very awkward. And Scott's a very nervous guy anyway, so.
He was at the first Throwdown, so I got to meet him a little bit, but I would have really liked to have dug in with some of those other Pittsburgh, Christopher and Scott a little bit more. You know, of course I know Baldinger, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, you can go stay with Baldinger anytime.
Oh yeah, in what's, I won't even say his name's old room. Jesus,
oh yeah.
I got some calls when all that was going down.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of Matt having a lot of hookers on speed dial. That's, you know, that makes everything seem to be right in the world.
Doesn't seem out of place.
Not in any way, shape.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, people. Hey, Agnes.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I am not a night person, so John, my apologies. I will not last till the end. I'm just gonna pop into my pumpkin times, but
neither am I. But the only reason this was later is because Chase is in Los Angeles.
Chase is on the West Coast. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I tried to do this earlier on a Sunday instead of Saturdays, but nobody showed up. So
it's always hit and miss. I mean, whether people show up on a Saturday night, it's really, I have not found a time where people consistently want to Zoom. So.
Yeah, we just had a big conversation about how Zooms make me feel like Harry Houdini and I'm trying to do some sort of a seance. I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I teach and so half my classes on Zoom and it's really odd.
Yeah, my wife teaches high school English and trying to get all those kids to react from the couch or the bed. It's
hey,
just...
Chase.
Hey there.
Chase.
Hey, Agnes.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, Chase.
Nice to see you, Paul. I'll be back.
Great to see you. Okay.
Oh, that's loud.
Flamingos.
Yeah, I tried to, I'm trying to remember what time it was. I think I did one of these podcasts at like 3:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday. And it was great. It was probably the best one I've ever recorded. We just didn't have anyone there.
Yeah, I wouldn't because unless the weather is really crummy, because normally I'd be in the woods. So.
Well, I had a lot of complaints from older people that were like, I want to do it at that time on a Sunday, but then when I did it, none of them showed up.
But isn't that always the case? If you ask people when they want to have a thing and then you move your time to accommodate people, it's the very people for whom you've moved your thing who are not going to show up. I mean, it's like that every single time I move an event to a time that's not convenient for me.
Yeah. And then, so now it's just, whenever I do it, which is a different day of the month every month, but it's always going to be at 7:00 on a Saturday. And I'm just not going to change it unless someone's in California like Chase is, and then it will be a little bit later.
Well, it's at 7 on a Saturday, right?
Yeah,
Just for him.
7 on a Saturday, and LA is fully locked down due to COVID. What else am I going to do?
I mean, is your Chase? I wanted to ask you: is your niece still in town, or did she go home?
She left and went back to Denver on Tuesday. So, yeah, and that definitely puts a big hole in my heart because I love the fact that this weekend we got to spend all that time hanging out with her, floating around in inflatable flamingos in the pool. But that's
Yeah,
her right there.
How often
nice.
do you get to see her?
That was actually the second time I've gotten to see her
Oh, wow.
because she lives in Denver with my sister. So I saw her right after she was born in February, and this was because of COVID, this is only the second time.
Well, hopefully you get to see her again sooner rather than later, and hopefully you can go to Denver.
That's my plan because I don't I don't have to be in a classroom until August 2021.
Okay.
We've already gone fully online for the spring. So I got some flexible time. It's just this is the curse, right? Like I've always wanted to have this much flexible time, and there's like so little I can do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Like for me, it was always difficult to get from reading to reading because you had to raise the money somehow. But now I could read every day if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But the thought of that's just exhausting.
Yeah, and it's not the same when it's online.
It's not as
No.
fun. So, I mean, at least the live Zooms are fun. What I found really strange was this reading where the facilitator only has the presenters on Zoom and the audience is on Facebook Live, and you see not if there's anybody even listening. So,
Yeah.
Right. Right. It's much more fun in this type of an environment where, you can see everybody and it's a social thing, because I mean that's what we're really missing the most in the COVID world is the social aspect. It's the making a connection with people. That's that's it. My grandmother, she's a therapist, and one of the most important things she ever said is that life is about relationships. And like COVID really strains and takes away some of the things that we've relied upon for relationships. And we have to be more creative and resilient in fighting for those aspects of a relationship that matter to us. Even if it means having to do it on Zoom.
It takes away a lot of, you think about what really does matter to you in relationship. It takes away a lot of the triviality.
Yeah. I mean, and what's weird is that like some people I am more connected to because of having to do relationships online due to COVID. Like some people from like across, it doesn't matter if somebody's like a mile away or 3,000 miles away, I can't see them. So I'm seeing more people that are thousands of miles away than I would have had COVID not happened.
that's true. And I met some people that I hadn't met before, and that is the one good thing for the pandemic. What I feel is really there's two things. The one thing that I'm a raging extrovert, so I'm probably one of the most extroverted people there are. It's all the little daily interactions that aren't the deeply meaningful conversation about the meaning of life or your ethics system, but are just, hey, how was your weekend? Stepping in at the secretary's, walking past an open office, poking your head into a colleague, chatting with a person at the grocery store, and they're all not, each interaction in itself is not very meaningful, but taken together they kind of make the glue that makes you feel like you're part of a community. And then the other thing is I find it very exhausting that any interaction with that you want to be more meaningful has to be deliberately organized. So if I think since the beginning of the pandemic, I've initiated 95% of the interactions I had. So you have to be the one to call, you have to read on the text, you have to, because otherwise it feels like nobody gives a crap. Really.
Hey, those trips to the grocery store are a big deal now. They're the social event. They're a social event of my week.
Yeah, I mean, I hardly ever even get to stores anymore.
Yeah, we can still do that. Chase, I've been wondering, what is Jeff Wine doing through this pandemic?
I figure Jeff Wine has figured out some kind of, because he's definitely a conservative down in Orange County. He's figured out some way to profit off of the conservative fear mongering around COVID-19. Like, he's probably invented a type of mask that fits the definition of a mask. So, you can go into Home Goods or Marshalls and then yell at somebody, but you can still breathe through it.
Well, yeah,
He's probably created a completely useless mask that angry Karen types in Orange County can wear, and he's probably made a bundle.
His mask is still probably better looking than my actual face. So,
well, you should be. Why don't you get into marketing? Like, you can get those print-on-demand masks. And I got the John Dorsey look from here down here.
That's right. I'd be like, give me the Jeff Wine. But all right. Well, what time do we have here? I have to check.
It's 9:08.
I'll wait like 2 or 3 more minutes, see if anyone comes in, and
Okay.
then we'll get started, I guess, because I know it is a bit later for everyone else.
All right, it's Saturday night, so we all have closed clubs we can't go to.
That's true. Is
But all
that Chase? Is that Indian restaurant open?
Yes, for takeout only.
Okay.
So yeah, it's still there. It's still humming. And that pub across the street, now they've got 2 big kind of tent-like tarp things in the parking lot, but they keep adding to it. So yes, they're outside, but they've put sides on the tents, so it's still enclosed.
Yeah, that's weird.
Like, just because you're not in the building doesn't mean you're safe.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean, if it's enclosed, you're still like, you're breathing in that air.
Right. I mean, because like the secret sauce on this is, if you're outside and the sun is shining and it's distanced, you're probably going to be fine. But like, once you start being like, well, it would be nice if we didn't have to deal with the wind, so let's do it very, no, the wind is blowing the COVID away.
Yeah.
Well, the sun is killing the COVID.
Yeah. I had jury duty over the summer, and I had to go in once, and I don't like being the person who is the squeaky wheel and confronting authority, but that time I pitched a fit because it was so bad, and I got excused.
Yeah, that just sounds awful to me, having to go through something like that.
They tried. I mean, they moved their jury selection from the courthouse to the Lions Club den where there's more space, but they had everybody check in and wait inside before it went into the courtroom part. So we sit there for an hour indoors, and they set their mandating masks, but they didn't enforce it. And the agents here, of course, take them off or just have them pulled down. And then the biggest idiocy was they were serving snacks and coffee.
Right.
And it's really, what adult needs to have a snack at 9 a.m.? You can last till lunch if you're not an infant. And it was just, that defeats the purpose. So it was very uncomfortable. I think that was the most uncomfortable. I mean, way more uncomfortable than teaching in person. That is fine.
I like the straight talk that I'm getting from Agnes right now.
Huh. Haven't had jury duty in a long time. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I haven't either in a long time. Not since I moved back to LA. It's bizarre. Didn't get it in Florida. Didn't get it in Missouri.
Yeah, the last 4 years I was in Toledo, I got it 4 years in a row.
Wow.
And then they have a policy, like if you've had it been called 4 times, they can't call you a fifth. They have to skip a year. But I moved that next year anyway, so it didn't even matter. But I'm just gonna check. I have a few notifications on my Facebook page. I want to see if anyone's trying to get in here.
Okay.
Oh, Chase, I already made my apologies to John. I may not last till the end of your presentation. So if I disappear, it's because I'm a morning person. And so no disrespect meant.
Oh, no worries about that. It's
Well,
just,
I know it's kind
I'm
of
just
weird. It's so rude if people disappear in the middle of your reading.
I'll just assume that anybody that disappears was horribly offended by the content of my poetry.
Or they were so blown away they had to leave the room. Well,
Just emotionally devastated.
that's right.
And there's a lot of poems about dead dogs in this book, so that's possible.
Dead dogs, dead cats.
Yeah, it's animal poetry, but for dead animals.
Oh no. But are you familiar with Shep, the saddest Towns Van Zandt song, which is saying a lot, is about a pet dog that he had that died, which he almost can't sing while you're hearing him sing it because he's so broken up. So anyway, yes, I'm ready for some dead animals. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just not that good of a writer because, the easiest pathos you could build is for a sick dog.
Huh.
Like that, like I don't have to do that much as a writer to make people feel emotionally stirred by writing about sick and dying animals.
And what is it about the COVID world that I'm more comfortable asking someone, but tell me about that time your favorite pet died than asking them, how is your day going today? That's like a terrifying question to me right now. I
was thinking about that with when Agnes was talking about missing the day-to-day interactions, and to be honest, that's kind of good for me because the small talk of day-to-day interactions have never been my strong suit. I'm not really good with sustaining a conversation based on how is the weather, I just can't jump in like, how is the weather? Well, it really makes me think about the melting of the polar ice caps. I got it. It just doesn't feel like I'm
all the
making
methane coming up out of the Siberian tundra. Yeah.
Right. It just doesn't feel like a conversation. Like I don't feel like I'm making a connection unless I'm talking about something that matters.
Yeah, but when I meant small talk, it's not, people aren't talking about the weather, but it's like the 2 minutes you ask your secretary, how's your mom doing? Or you ask your colleague, how was your hike on the weekend? I mean, all those things in the big scheme, they're not really super important, but it's these, I think these are all little bits of connection. You don't just talk talk, but it's connecting. And I'm totally miss my students. So
Me too.
I'm used to seeing in the week 400 different faces, and
you're right. It's more the checking in part.
Yeah.
Checking in on people and seeing how they're doing, and doing so consistently and constantly, and having that being a reliable thing that on Monday I'm going to go to work and people are going to care that I exist.
That's it. This feeling that now with the isolation, it's hard to feel like if I disappear now, how many people would really give a fig? I mean, my family, yes, but for the rest of the world, it feels pretty much invisible most of the time.
At a certain point, my students are going to notice that they're not getting grades on anything after a while. But the lessons are all preloaded. They're ready to go.
I can honestly say that no one has ever asked me how my hike was on the weekend, though. Maybe, how was that fried chicken?
That's just a reliable question you can ask John Dorsey.
Well, that is for you the same kind of joy that I get from the hiking, I guess, right? It's your equivalent of feeling like there's a point in being alive.
Yeah, I guess so. And poetry is that. I've often said if I wasn't involved in all of this, I probably would have killed myself a long time ago. And that's the truth. You know, we all have to have something.
Yeah, pretty much anything you're interested in is an excuse not to kill yourself.
I suppose so. Yeah, like the films of Nicolas Cage. Reason to stay alive.
But which era of Nicolas Cage films are we talking about? Because
Hey,
there's definitely a reason to stay alive era and a reason not to era. But depending on who you talk to, it could be either.
Chase, there's a reason for him not to stay alive, but for me, like, it's all good.
It's a long way from Cotton Club to Con Air.
I'm even going more recent than Con Air, so that's downright Citizen Kane. But all right, well, it's about a quarter after, so
All
I'm
right.
gonna get started, and if people wander in, I'll let them in.
Sure.
Chase, how I've been doing this the last few times is I'm going to ask you a few questions and then I'm going to have you read a few poems, and I'll kind of alternate that way,
Okay.
if that works.
Yeah, sure. By the way, I love the setup that you've got, John. You look like you're in like some kind of college bar. You know, you're kind of a punk band that's only done a few gigs so far, but you got a lot of moxie.
Well, yeah, and the Rohypnol is flowing like a river in my club. But no, actually, Jason Reberg is here beside me, and he's kind of designed this little black box theater.
Oh, I love it with the lights. You're glowing in this pink.
Which building are
luminescence.
you in? Are you in Jason's house or
Oh no! What did you say, Agnes?
which building are you guys in right now?
We're in the Greg Edmondson Memorial Black Box Theater right here, as I like to refer to it.
So it's in the house next to yours.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and now I'm gonna have everyone else turn their mic off except for Chase. So, are you okay over there?
I think so.
All right.
Can you see?
Not well. Cool. Chase, I wanted to ask you, I've spent like the better part of today reading your book, which is pretty fantastic. My favorite poem in the book is actually your poem Ray Cats.
Ooh, okay. I'll put that on my list to read.
Yeah, and I like several of them, but I don't know why that piece in particular just kind of spoke to me. I was wondering if you could tell me, like, throughout the book, obviously it's thematic, and you deal a lot more with biology, human biology, animal biology of all sorts. Why? What is? It's a basic thing with a lot of layers, but what led you to write in that direction, I guess, with that sort of focus?
Well, that was a really good poem to kind of get at the core thematically of what I was really interested in exploring in this book. So the title, Sentinel Species, refers to species of animals whose behaviors can clue us into a threat in our environment that we as humans cannot perceive. So my buddy Dallas Robinson, who designed the cover, very astutely decided to put the canary on the front. And the canary is probably the most famous sentinel species because they're used traditionally by coal miners down deep in the coal mines to gauge carbon monoxide. So when the canary faints, you know there's carbon monoxide in the air and you get out of the mine. And there's a canary poem in the back of in the book. But so that's a sentinel species, and any other animal whose behavior is odd, confusing, or clues us into a danger. And so this book is all about exploring the relationships we have with animals, nature, anything in the natural environment, and looking at them in ways that try to clue us into what it means to be human, what's going on in our society, how we ourselves are impacting the environment. And so Ray Cats comes from, well, two levels there, because it's both about my cat who died last year, Charlie, and it's also about nuclear waste. Two things that usually go together when you're thinking about your cat. So Ray Cats are actually a real existing thing. Back about 30 years ago in the 80s, I guess that's almost 40 years now. So a bunch of scientists posed a problem that we have all of this nuclear waste from the nuclear age that fueled our bombs, fueled our energy, and gave us all these hopes of a new optimistic future. But the problem is that nuclear waste takes forever to be non-radioactive. And we like to seal it up in a big drum, bury it in somewhere in the Nevada desert, and then just feel like, okay, it's away from us. But the problem is that the half-life is something like 10,000 years. And so the problem is that it's hard to then think about what's the world going to be like in 10,000 years. I mean, we have barely an idea of what the world was like 6,000 years ago. Like, is language going to change? Will we have a language? What is it going to look like? So a bunch of scientists try to come up with the idea of how are we going to alert future societies that there is nuclear waste there? So they came up with a bunch of ideas, looked at legends and how language has evolved. And one of the ideas that got proposed was breeding ray cats, which would be genetically engineering cats to glow bright green when exposed to radiation, and then task a bunch of poets and writers to write stories and songs about the legend of the beware of the ray cats. So that with the hope that in 10,000 years, the story of the ray cats would still have been transmitted. Like for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh, that story is 6,000 to 8,000 years old. We still have it, and it still says things to us. So with that inspiration, we could maybe keep people safe from nuclear radiation via the legend of the ray cats. Maybe people will still be singing it in 10,000 years. They'll be singing ray cats, and they'll be singing probably My Humps by Fergie. And so then it made me think about my cat, Charlie, because cats are brilliant and also kind of psychotic. So my cat was running around with the zoomies around 3 in the morning, and I thought, what if cats were trying to tell us something with their crazy behavior, and we just don't remember the poems or stories and songs that were supposed to go with it? What if Charlie knows that there's something terrible happening and he's not being crazy? He was bred genetically to alarm me to something that was going on. So it was interesting that you latched onto that, because that poem is like right at the core of what I wanted to do with this book.
Is that because we live in a crazy world and a crazy country? Like, did they actually commission poets and writers to write about the ray cat?
No, unfortunately, it didn't get any steam beyond just being proposed at some conferences, though I still think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I could actually see our government doing that. So
right. We're not going to try to deal with like a responsible way to handle nuclear waste. We'll just make some genetically altered cats and say, okay, cats, in 10,000 years, it's your job.
I could see it. Let me ask you another question here.
Problem is with the radiation, they will evolve to probably be the dominant species by that time. So then we're screwed.
Yeah, in about 5,000 years, America will be run by radioactive cats.
Yeah.
And right. Given where we're at right now, I, for one, welcome our radioactive cat overlords.
Chase, I wanted to ask you, do you yourself have a favorite piece in the book? And if you do, which one is it and why?
That's a really interesting question. And I guess there's a lot of different ways I could go about determining what would be a favorite, I think I would say the one that is most like has a nostalgic, close to my heart feeling is the one in the third part, Zoonomia, the Inquisitor's Parrots. One, because it's, I think, one of my tightest works, as in being able to realize a big idea in a very short amount of space. But also, it was my first seriously published poem. So to kind of go back, I was a creative writing major in college. I wrote in high school as well, obviously, because I was an angsty gay teen. But and I kind of put creative writing aside when I decided to go on and get my PhD in comparative literature. And in 2017, I decided that I kind of wanted to take another direction. You know, research academia is a cage match to the death over terrible jobs with ridiculous amount of works and no limited satisfaction. So when I decided to go the 2-year college route, I said, okay, you no longer have research over your head telling you you don't have time to do things. So if writing poetry, if writing creatively, if being in the literary world matters to you, you got to start writing. So I did in 2017 and wrote some bad poems that are not in this book, and then tried to write some good ones. And The Inquisitor's Parrots was the first one that got picked up by a good literary magazine. It's in Waccamaw. So that was like the first proof of concept that what I was doing registered with other people, that I wasn't self-deluded. Some of this writing was working. And it gave me a good idea of then what was working. So I guess it's like, you know, we all have a little bit of nostalgia for our first time. And for me, The Inquisitor's Parrots was my first time.
Well, that's very cool. Yeah, that kind of answers another question I was going to ask you, and that was like, from like how long of a time period was the material written over in this book? Like, but I would guess in the last 2 or 3 years then.
Yes, the majority of them are the last 3 years since I kind of went more seriously into working on poetry. But a couple of them actually do date back all the way to being an undergrad in college. A couple of them are ones that I resurrected from my early college years and edited and revamped with my now running headfirst into that brick wall of middle age perspective that I have now. You know, I looked back at some of the stuff from when I was younger and say, okay, where did younger me have some good ideas, but needed a little bit more perspective? You know, needed to be a little bit less of an angsty punk, but still have that angsty punk purple mohawk, which I had when I was in college. You know, that energy and that resistance and that defiance. Let's harness that, but also know where to direct it. So a couple of the poems here actually do date back to me having a purple mohawk. Let's see, especially the one burying my dog behind the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. I wrote that as Ronald Reagan was being buried in the Presidential Library 1 mile from where I grew up.
Which is a great poem. That has a lot of humor in it that I really enjoyed. Of course, you mentioned Ronald Reagan in a few different poems.
Well, he's buried in where I grew up in Simi Valley, and his presidential library is also, it's on top of the hills because it's a valley. It's 360 degrees of mountains. So he's got this big monument to himself up on those mountains. And the Republicans always have debates and events up there. So there's this shrine to conservatism that overlooks where I grew up and where my parents currently live. So it makes sense that Reagan would be referenced several times in my work because his shadow looms over this land that formed me. And it's the funniest thing because I mean, I grew up in LA, so you wouldn't think like, you know, I have this conservative, you know, specter that is haunting me. But also, he was an actor and an entertainer. He starred in a movie with a chimp, you know, so he
Perhaps
is
his best film.
Well, I don't know. The Newt Rockney story is pretty good, but I like a good football movie. But yeah, so he is, it's funny, he is this icon of the conservative world, and yet he is as much a polished Hollywood liberal dream factory, not the real America product, and yet he is the patron saint. So that contradiction in him, that way in which we all in America kind of sees what they want to see in him, that actually kind of fits perfectly for growing up in LA. And yeah, he still haunts the land these days.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and we'll get into some poems. You kind of addressed it already, and I wanted to ask, like, when you were working on this book, how much did the editing process come into play, and how much of the material is just like straight out of your head, I guess? How basically, I'm asking how much what is your process like?
Man, I wish I had a great answer because that would then say that I've got a good process. Because it could be a little bit haphazard at times. Sometimes a poem comes out of me and it just flows line by line by line by line, you know? And the way that that poem reads could show that that's how I wrote it. You know, some poems just feel like it's a very short rant or just flowing of an idea that you had, you know, 60 seconds, here's the idea, step, 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 done. A couple of poems are like that. In general, most of these poems went through a pretty rigorous process of editing. A lot of them got sent to friends, especially Dan Crocker and Mike James saw a lot of the poems before they went anywhere, especially the ones that I wrote in 2017, 2018, when I was still getting my footing. Those were two writers that I really made as my benchmarks to say that if it's as good as something either Mike or Dan would write, then it's good enough to put out in the world. So having their perspective mattered. Dan's a little bit more of a cheerleader, whereas Mike is a little bit more tough, which is fantastic. That's the formula I work the best on. Like when I was writing my dissertation for my PhD, I had one professor who was just the cheerleader and everything was great, and the other one who was tough. And that's the environment I work most productively in. But yeah, a lot of these poems are pieces that start with a main idea, and then I go somewhere, and then sometimes I'm like, nope, that was the wrong way to go. Like the poem about my niece Nellie, Imitation Unicorns. It has a piece in it that was almost an entire poem by itself, and I sent it to Mike James, and he's like, you got a good idea here, but I don't like what you did with it. So I kind of let it go. It's the part of that poem that talks about Marco Polo. So I just kind of held it because that's an idea. And then it was an idea waiting for its poem. And when I started writing writing a poem for my niece about unicorns, because when I first met her and held her, she had a unicorn onesie on with little unicorn feet. And so thus, when I was writing about her, starting with the idea of unicorns, that's when that piece, that little fragment I had about Marco Polo complaining about unicorns, that's when it found a home. So that editing process of working on segments, because something can be a piece of a poem, it just doesn't have its home yet. And some of these poems are like that, where it was a piece I had waiting for its big idea. A couple of these are just a line that I rescued from an older poem and said, there's something here. It's not in the right place, but if I bracket it the right way, it'll become something.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you that question is I'll compliment you here and say that when I was reading the book, the one thing I thought throughout is it all felt very natural, as if you could have written it in one go. But yeah, so it made me wonder what your creative process was.
Well, definitely I went back to animals a lot as I was starting to write poetry again. One, because I just love animals. Like, I just love to learn new animal facts and trivia about animals. And so that's one of the hardest things with writing poetry is, what the hell am I going to write about? You know, how do I start a poem? What am I going to do? I want to write a poem, but what am I going to write about? So one of the ways to break that ice was simply to say, write about animals. And so thus new ideas would come from me because I would learn a fact about animals, an animal specifically, and that would stick with me. And so I'm like, well, what's the poetic significance of this? Where can I develop this idea? How can I riff off of this? Like a good example is when the blobfish poem, when I learned that blobfish doesn't actually look like that in the water. It only looks like that because you see the pictures of blobfish. He's this sad, frowning guy, big pink blob. And so we all made fun of him online. Poor fish got bullied. He got internet bullied. And it turns out that that fish doesn't look that way down deep where it lives. It's just that that animal lives under huge pressure from the sea level. And so when you pull it out of its natural environment, it explodes. Its eyes bulge out, its head gets big. Literally parts of his organs and brain shoot out. And that's what you're seeing as that weird nose. He doesn't actually have that. So when I learned that, I thought, man, that's a really good metaphor for any time when one of us has felt like we've been taken out of our depths. You know, we're just fine and functional, living where we are, and then somebody else grabs us, yanks us out into their world, and then mocks us because we're not fitting what they want to look at. So it was easier for me to start writing when I said, okay, that's your prompt: animal facts, animal information. So that's why it goes together naturally, because this was just the easiest way to start writing. Plus, I'll also say that you know, the last couple of years of American culture has seen the birth of the comfort animal, because we just relate better to animals. And I think that's kind of why, for me, that it's easier for me to see the pathos of an animal and to write about that and use the animal as my kind of comfort for talking about other things. Because I'm still getting used to the fact that poetry is about just putting yourself out there in a very naked and open way. And I want to do that, but you know, I want to bring my comfort animal with me on the journey. And so that's the blobfish, that's the unicorns, that's the parrots. I literally brought my cat with me to this book. So those are my comfort animals.
Okay. Well, I just want to let everyone know, because I'm bad about this, that the program you're listening to is OAC Books Presents, and my guest is Chase Dimock, and we are recording from Osage Arts Community in Bill, Missouri, in Jason Reberg's Black Box Theater. Yeah, I'm always bad about actually saying the name of the program before I get started. So now that I've done that, Chase, if you would read, you know, somewhere between maybe 3 to 5 poems, and then we'll talk a little more.
Well, it would make sense now to read the poems that we just talked about.
Oh yeah, sure. Whatever you like.
All right, so I'll read a couple of the ones that we just chatted about. Let's see, and I'll do it in order, which I can find them in the table of contents. So I got my book here, Sentinel Species. So the first one I'll read is called Imitation Unicorns. And this one is dedicated to my niece, Nellie, who is looking over me in right here. I guess this is the video attached to this, or is it just the sound?
I'm attached to it.
Okay. Well, if you can't see it, in the picture over the side to me, she's dressed as the hungry caterpillar.
Oh, I can. Yeah, I couldn't tell. Yeah, now that you tell me the caterpillar, I could see it well.
Okay. So yeah, so she's doing, and she was 2 weeks old. So she's already doing literary cosplay at 2 weeks old.
Huh.
So anyway, so this is what I wrote for her. It's called Imitation Unicorns. When I first held you, I watched unicorns prance in soft, fleecy pink across your onesie as your dreaming, breathing belly rose in and out, lifting them off into the infinite pastel possibilities of infancy. I wondered when you'll start sorting your fairy tale menagerie into fact and fiction, when Z will still be for zebra, but you will have to settle for urchin, or the unspotted saw-whet owl, the unlined giant chafer beetle, the unstreaked tit tyrant, or any number of animals defined by what they lack. Will you still marvel at the unadorned rock wallaby despite his lack of adornment? Will you still respect the unarmored three-spined stickleback despite her vulnerability? Will you accept substitutes? The fencing narwhal swashbuckling the Baltic, more weaponized than majestic. The hornbill who flies like Pegasus but shrieks, fighting for figs in the trees. And here's the part that Mike James saved me from using badly. When Marco Polo first laid eyes on a rhinoceros in the land of Bosma, he wrote, unicorns are, quote, altogether different from what we fancied. He bemoaned, unicorns are not in the least like which our stories tell of. They delight much to abide in mire and mud. 'Tis a passing ugly beast to look upon. I hope you never use myth as your measure. When you gaze at the unicorn trotting through the frosted cupcake mountains on your Lisa Frank Trapper Keeper, know that fantasy is a projection of our inner colors on a world both gray and yet so brilliant we can't see all the light in the spectrum. And most of all, humor your uncle when he pulls a mule to your birthday party, straps a rainbow-painted corn cob to its head. When you ride old Wilbur into a sunset that stops at the fence in your backyard, know he did the best unicorn impersonation his old bones could carry. So that's Imitation Unicorns. Yay! Applause from the audience. So let's see, what were the other ones I talked about? Oh, Ray Cats. Is this the Ray Cat poem we talked about earlier? Ray Cats. The half-life of our waste is longer than the span of our language. In 10,000 years, long after the American flag has fallen and the breath of the last English speaker has evaporated into the air, our nuclear byproducts will still be more than 50% potent, still toxic beneath the sands of Nevada, where suburban civilization will sprawl, then ebb. How will we warn the heirs to our radiation in a language yet to be uttered? To answer, scientists and linguists created nuclear semiotics, a study into the universal signification of danger and fear. Bastide and Fabry proposed breeding ray cats, a species that glows ominously when exposed to radiation. Fabulous and artists would be tasked to create a mythology of the illuminated cat as a nuclear harbinger, knowing stories and sculpture survive well past the life of the culture in which they were first imagined. When I see Charlie staring blankly at a wall, I wonder if he's transfixed by an isotopic decay, only that he can see. Those glowing yellow eyes trying to tell me something invisibly denaturing my DNA. When he dashes through the house at 3 a.m., can he hear some kind of high-pitched Geiger counter racing, telling me to run? When he begs me to rub his belly, only to claw and bite my hand, is it the nitrates in my hot dog? The aluminum in my deodorant? The particulates of smog seeping into the room? I try to translate the cuneiform Charlie scratches down my arms. The marks puff red in a warning I cannot read. That's 3 cats.
So good. So good, Chase.
I'm honored by the fact that that was your favorite one in here, because that was one of those ones that I'm like, I think this one's really good, and then didn't get accepted anywhere. Except it is going to be, and it's actually interesting, that Naropa University picked this one up for Bombay Gin. I just haven't gotten the book yet, but yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, definitely. There's a synergy there between Naropa and John Dorsey that kind of fits. Let's see. We talked about, the one about Ronald Reagan. So this one comes from this is the energy of my punk, purple mohawk, liberal at Santa Cruz energy, edited by I'm in my mid 30s and I have a 401k reality. So this one's called Burying My Dog Behind the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. In the hills of my hometown, I have witnessed the burials of 2 house cats, a golden retriever, and the 40th president of the United States of America. Bo stayed alive long enough for me to arrive home from college. Glaucoma fogged his vision. Horseflies lapped at his sores, his tail too limp to swat them away. The rock I placed above his grave is missing, probably blown down the dusty cliff by the Santa Ana winds. I replaced it with a half-drunk PBR the last time I hiked up the hill. Across the ravine, Reagan's library is visible from a golf course and a trailer park. When Reagan died, an old man spent 2 weeks on a freeway overpass holding up an autographed picture, burning jelly bean-shaped carcinoma into his bald head, with not so much as a puffy VFW post hat to shield the sun. He remembers the colonial 80s, the white flight from LA that formed Simi Valley, that built a community of upper middle class, upper middle managers. Makeshift memorials in Reagan's honor marked the significant street corners. Red, white, and blue dyed 7-Eleven carnations and jet ink home printed Reagan photos replaced the weathered remnants on telephone poles. Tattered posters of lost pets, campaign posters, frayed yellow support our troops ribbons, and the wax of the candlelight vigil where Joey was hit on his bike. The memorials popped up everywhere that seemed vaguely patriotic. In front of the post office, city hall, the police station, and beneath the 50 feet of rippling stars and stripes waving in the parking lot of the Chevrolet dealership. There was a collective sense of loss, though not everyone was quite sure what they were missing. I could see my house from the helicopter footage, the parade of limousines and hearses filled with dignitaries, as Secret Service agents guarded a corpse with their lives. Larry King stared silently at me from the TV, waiting for some kind of grieving I didn't know how to muster, as I stroked a cat in my lap, who did not know it too in 4 months would join the president and Bo in the hills. By the way, I don't know why, but I decided I had to change the name of my dog because he died, and I feel like I didn't get consent from him to use his name. Whereas Charlie, he was alive for my rebirth as a poet. So he was there while I was writing. So it's I had consent from him. So I could use his real name, but Bo was not my golden retriever's name. In fact, it's actually talking about crying about poems. Bo is actually Jimmy Stewart's dog's name. And on the Tonight Show, he read a poem he wrote about his dog Bo and cried in front of Johnny Carson.
Huh.
And that's the reference. So yes, I'm stealing from Jimmy Stewart.
Making that change, was it a little bit easier for you to write the poem?
Yes. It was easier for me to publish it, because this one appears originally in the Museum of Americana online, which is really wonderful online publication. But something about changing the dog's name, you know, to say I don't have consent from beyond the grave, made it seem like it was okay to put this out into the world. You know, like, and that's one of the hardest things about being a writer. And one of the things I admire very much about your work, John, is that like you're able to talk about family and about deep things from your childhood and about the people you care about, and you're able to put that out there. And I'm still, since I haven't been writing for as nearly as long as you have and not been publishing for as long, I still have a little bit of skittishness about like, oh, my feelings are out there and anybody can Google them, and then anybody can make fun of me on Twitter because my feelings are out there.
Yeah, I have the benefit of my family not actually reading my poetry. Until recently, my mother has, in the last year or two, taken an interest, and it's slightly disturbing.
Yeah, that's the same thing. That's why there's nothing about my parents in this book. You know, not that they're not worthy of poems, they are, but, and I wouldn't have anything to, you know, it's not like I'm about to write, you know, my own version of Sylvia Plath's Daddy from a gay perspective. You know, I don't have that in me, you know. Maybe that's the problem, is how do you write a poem about your dad when it's like, I have a good relationship with him and he is currently alive and we do things like plant trees together. There's no poem there.
You know, I'd like to think there is a poem there. It's just a little bit harder to get to, but
right. It would take somebody that's very skilled, you know, whereas I'm like, oh, I'll make people feel things by having a dead animal in there. That's low-hanging fruit sometimes.
Well, whatever it is, you did a good job, a really good job with what you had. Your book is excellent. So you clearly chose topics that were either interesting or you made interesting. So
I like the idea that's pretty high praise, is that I can make something interesting.
I think we can. I think that we all have that as a possibility as writers. I hope so.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the big skill, because anybody can point to something that matters, but what I think real insight from an artist is when you're able to take something that people overlook or discount or are familiar with but just don't invest thought into, and then say, no, with my perspective, you're missing this. And then suddenly you've rebirthed and you have deified and you've opened up the cosmos of a thing that we overlook. You know, it's like something that I tell my students when they write essays, is that they think, man, in 4 pages, I got to write everything there is to know about this topic and information. I'm like, you don't have to do that, because if I want just that, I'll go on Wikipedia. What I want from you is, what is the very unique insight you can bring? Because I'm reading this not to get info on a topic. I'm reading this because I want somebody who is not me to show me something I'm not going to find, because I'm not them, I'm me. And I think a really great writer can make us care about something that we've overlooked, because they see something in it that we cannot see because we're not them.
Well, you're right. I always preach to people about accessible language. I'm a huge believer in it. And I think like part of what you're getting into and part of what I love about poetry is the ability to make things that are important to you important to someone else as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they'll take away what you took away from the experience necessarily, at least not every time. Yeah, but to be able to share that commonality, it's just really important.
Absolutely. That's when I teach poetry in my classes, one of my lines that I repeat over and over again when we analyze a poem is that I believe that the greatest poems ever written are able to take a very specific, unique, subjective thing to the writer, because we like to learn new things about a person. We want to see their perspective. So they're able to take something super personal, super specific, but use it in language that also opens it up to everybody. So they can talk about the specific in a universal way and not sacrifice an inch of the specificity to their lives, and yet communicate it in a way that we all identify with it. So that, and the power is when we could take, when somebody can do that, and I can identify with them and feel what they're experiencing, even though there are big differences between us. And that's a powerful poem. You know, one I can think of, a classic from long time ago, but I use it a lot because I do a lot of bird poetry. In fact, I'm working on a project with science students and art students and poetry students on a website about local birds. And one of the ones I use is kind of like a baseline is the Paul Laurence Dunbar poem, Sympathy. And that's where the famous line, "I know why the caged bird sings," comes out of, which later Maya Angelou riffs, not rips. Just want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
She's riffing on the idea, because Maya Angelou was the first poet I ever fell in love with as a young person, and she is God to me. But anyway, but that line, even though he's writing specifically about the experience of experiencing racism in the late 19th century, the metaphor that he uses and the language with which he communicates his experience speaks to everybody. And so we can both understand through it exactly what it was like to have to go through that type of segregation and Jim Crow era America. And at the same time, he's speaking to something that we've all experienced. We've all been the caged bird. So we both get the specificity, and he opens up a universe of experience that puts words that explain how we feel. It's genius. And great poems do that.
That's I'd wanted to ask you, you obviously work in academia. I've been to your college. It's a wonderful campus there. I was amazed by how large it was, but I wanted to ask, does any of your day-to-day and that experience impact the poetry that you write now? And if so, how? And part B of that, have any of your like students or coworkers, anyone like that, made it into one of your poems?
That's really interesting. And I almost have to look at like my table of contents to be like, oh, is anybody that I work with in here? So, yeah, there's a lot of layers to that question. First, I don't think there's any coworker or person on campus that's like in a poem specifically, but this entire book is better because my colleague, Mary Angelino, who teaches the creative writing classes on campus, she edited the entire manuscript. So she was the one, after I put it together, that I sent it to. So she is the reason why it is more efficient, tighter, and cohesive. You know, she gave amazing advice, both line level on some poems, but also on the level of, I don't know about this poem, or if you want to keep it, you need to work this angle. So a couple of pieces that, you know, worked my best didn't make it in. A couple of pieces that I was like, on, but she's like, no, you got something here, but you got to work this, got in there, which I'm very glad, because the canary poem got in here because she had a voice of confidence on it. She just gave me really good line by line edits to make it more efficient. Because one of my things about, and this goes back to being an academic, is that I have a problem sometimes when I write that I tend to make my poems too academic. Because I have a big idea, and coming from writing academic literary analysis, I'm like, okay, I need to describe everything there is about it and make sure you absolutely understand point by point by point by point. And that's not how poetry works. You know, that's how academic writing works. You know, so her help, I kind of edited out and let go of that a metaphor is okay. I mean, obviously I know that, but there's a little part of me that's like, yeah, but a metaphor could be interpreted in different ways. Wait, you know that's how poems work. Stop it. Don't be a control freak over your own poem. Other people are allowed to get something out of it that isn't you. And that's actually what makes a poem work. You know this, stop being a control freak. But that's, I think maybe that's just part of being new-ish to creative writing, is that, you know, you put out your babies into the world and you want them to be exactly as you saw them, but in reality, they are their own entities and they're going to go their own direction. And that's what makes them viable. If they only go your direction, then the poem doesn't work. It's just a rant. Instead, it has to open up ideas to other people. But yeah, definitely, this is populated by my experience in academia. And there's one poem that is specifically a product of my work at College of the Canyons. And that one is, where is it? It's page 85. It's Shooting the Janitor, about vultures. And it's specifically, it goes back to what I was talking about the bird project. So me and the biology professor and the art professor decided to do a collaborative project on campus between the bio students, the art students, and poetry students. And so what we did was we created a website about birds that you can spot on our campus at College of the Canyons. And we included spotter's guide, so how do you find the bird and how do you interpret their behavior, an artistic rendering of the bird, and then poetry about the bird. And so when we were starting this last year, I needed proof of concept. So I took the narrative about finding the bird and a good drawing of the bird, and then wrote my own poem. And so that's where Shooting the Janitor came from. It was to get a project on campus launched. And it's actually, if you go to our site, birdsofthecanyons.wordpress.com, that is, that's where Shooting the Janitor is located, though it's called Turkey Vulture, so as not to confuse people.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you, do you want to read that poem right now?
Sure, I'll read it right now.
Sure.
So this one's called Shooting the Janitor. And man, I've read this many times on campus as part of many strategic initiatives. They're really proud of the bird website. So I'm like, they're like, go read your vulture poem. Okay. So Shooting the Janitor. The turkey vulture does not understand how when we look to the sky for omens, we cannot see the life behind the symbol, the blocked artery beneath the heartbreak. He does not know what we hear his call as a dirge, that his patience is confused for prophecy, that he looms over the festering of guilt. Gliding above, unaware he is a harbinger, people below chart the geometry of his loops, trace his flight pattern with their fingers, hoping to spell out a name, something he knows about the ground he circles. And the longer you watch, the more he perceives. He circles you. But the turkey vulture is not the grim reaper's falcon, running errands for the damned. His prey is carrion, Those animals who long ago keeled over belly full of pesticide, collided off the front bumper, lapped antifreeze trickling down the arroyo, managed to limp further after the buckshot, and saw the face beneath the hood was man and his scythe was an aerosol can. He looks for putrefaction, meat spoiled to the point of danger. He can eat salmonella without illness, clean the streets of botulism and anthrax with only a beak and stomach. No, the turkey vulture isn't coming for us. He is the coroner and the janitor swooping in long after we fled the scene. He swallows our casualties and digests the evidence. And that one too is inspired by a fact. In fact, I literally last night recorded a video to talk to the poetry students who are going to write more bird poems for our project. And I read the piece. And I talked to them about the fact that I wrote this based on the research that the biology students did about vultures. And what I learned is that they could eat salmonella and anthrax. And what that made me realize was that our metaphor about the vulture, anytime you see them on TV or in a cartoon, they're always that symbol of you're going to die. So we think of the vultures as being like menacing and hovering over us because we've defined their existence based on human feelings. But in reality, they're the opposite. They're not telling us we're going to die. They're helping us live because we are the ones that are running over animals and killing them needlessly. And the vulture is coming in and eating the carcass. So not only are they eliminating that reminder that we have of the fact that we are killing animals needlessly and stupidly, but also they're cleaning up the carcass that could kill us with salmonella and anthrax. So our metaphor is the opposite of the reality of what a vulture is doing for us. And that's a problem, is I think a lot of animals are dying because of metaphor.
As it so often is in our culture with any number of things.
Yeah, like after Jaws, when people were like, yeah, let's kill all the sharks. No, they're kind of they're an important part of the ecosystem, and without them, we're not going to have the seafood that we want.
Speaking about like killing, eating the carcasses, one of my other favorite poems in your book was the young coroner poem.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought was a lot of fun. And the one thing I wanted to ask you about that poem, obviously you're not a coroner in real life, but I wondered if the character within the poem was you, just because of his like interest in all of that and your interest in biology in this book. I wondered if you were the young coroner in a way.
Yeah, he is me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the writing about your family and everything. So I had to change a few elements of that. But yeah, and now I have to flip back to that one because I'm like, okay, which version of that? That's on page 17. Okay, yeah, that kid is me. Because of especially didn't we all poke at the cellophane wrapped ground beef, and like see the blood go and ew and yeah. we all did that.
Yeah, that was one of the poems in the book that genuinely made me smile. That and in the poem where you talk about the coach at your high school and you reference Meredith Baxter. Learning about bulimia, I thought was so funny.
Wow, it's funny, your picks are all validating early 20s punk me, because that one, the coroner poem, is another one that existed that I wrote when I was an angsty gay punk in Santa Cruz and have resurrected and redirected in a more productive way as an adult. And then, yeah, that other one about high school and the fact that that our health class was taught by the assistant football coach. And yeah, the background on that one is that our health, and we're here in LA, you know, we got, right, isn't this like the bleeding liberal factory here? Isn't this what conservatives like rail against? And yet my health education in 9th grade, yeah, was nothing. It was taught by the assistant football coach. And instead of like reading books or learning things, we just watched made for TV movies. And Meredith Baxter was in one about bulimia. And so that's where the reference is.
I just remember in the 90s and probably the early 2000s, it seemed like Meredith Baxter and Judith Light were in every one of those type of movies. So
yes, yeah. Right, because they already have ethos and gravitas from the 80s. Like, you know, am I going to learn about bulimia? I don't know. Wait, it's the mom from Family Ties. Yeah, I'm paying attention now. Same thing with Judith Light, you know, because even though the show asked the existential question, who's the boss? If you watch the show, you knew Judith Light's the boss. Because she kind of like, you know, owned the home and was paying Tony Danza to clean her house. So like, why was that even a question? Judith Light was the boss. And anybody who watched that knew she was the boss. So if you saw her in something, you would watch because Judith Light is the boss.
See, we're getting down to the real issues now.
And these are the type of questions my poems answer.
Yeah. Would you want to read a few more poems, and then I'll ask you? Probably have a few more questions left, not many.
Sure. So I'll let's see. I'll read the two that you just brought up, and I'll also read, since I didn't read it earlier, the one that's my favorite.
Okay.
The Inquisitor's Parrots.
Nice. Okay.
So this one's The Inquisitor's Parrots, and it was published originally in Waccamaw by Coastal Carolina University. Go Chanticleers. It's a large chicken. That's their mascot. The Inquisitor's Parrots. When Columbus returned to Spain, he gifted 2 parrots to Queen Isabella. History cannot tell us how long it took until the birds had forgotten the language of the Taino they mimicked on the island, and if the Spaniards ever registered those sounds as distinct words or assumed they were meaningless squawks. We do not know if the sailors, tired of hearing the parrots screech for home, stowed them deep in the brig, where they slept a 4-month night, or if they bonded with their captors, perched on their shoulders and learned the Spanish tongue. There are no records of their lives in Spain or what they witnessed in the royal councils. We do not know if they were bribed with olives to teach them to shriek, "Ah, auto de fe, auto de fe," as the condemned was mortified before the crowd, or if the parrots themselves ended their lives on the braziers, having revealed too much. All right, so 2 more. So let's see, Coroner and, oh yeah, Patient Zero. Okay. Man, if 20-year-old me knew he was getting this much praise, one, he'd let it go to his head and do really stupid things because of it, but also he'd be pretty tickled. So this is The Coroner as a Child, and yes, this is another one that I wrote when I was an undergrad and then resurrected as an adult. And it originally was published in Trailer Park Quarterly by Dan and Rebecca. Oh yeah, big following here. The Coroner as Child. From the child's seat in the grocery cart, he reached to poke the plastic-wrapped beef. A cold spun yarn of muscle pooled blood around his finger. His grandmother's reprimand disturbed the careful application and release of pressure. As he yanked his arm away, he squirmed, slipped, and punched his finger through the cellophane, a bullet hole in an unfurled animal. She made him pay for the meat with a $5 bill kept in his birthday card. On the ride home, he held the wounded beef in his lap, feeling the warming blood spilled into the bag and sloshing over his legs in rhythm with the potholes. He watched Grandma fry the meat into patties, grease spattering pinprick burns across her arms. Her lecture on wasting food and children starving in Ethiopia muffled by the sizzle. The smoke, visible in the kitchen light, blanketed the antiseptic lemon smell on his twice-washed hands as the beef's skin-knee color seared into cadaverous gray. "Do you think they're safe to eat now?" she asked, answer already in mind. He nodded without reason. "Aha!" She cut a patty in half. "Still pink!" At the dinner table, his burger was served, dissected into 3 blackened parts, leaving charcoal trails on the bun. Even a ketchup transfusion could not reanimate the cremated remains as they sanded his teeth. She counted his bites, 1, 2, 3 to 50, before motioning to swallow. The puree of meat, bread, and condiment, and textured filler. When she cleared the dishes, he snuck out to the garbage can and dug out the grocery bag and peppered with old coffee grounds and sticky with brown oxidized blood. He stuck his finger in the gristle smeared on the styrofoam tray. The taste was metallic, like a razor blade inside a candied apple handed by a stranger on Halloween, and just as sweet. Thank you. And then I'll do the one you referenced with my high school assistant football coach. Let's see, that one is called Patient Zero. And this one, this was an early one that I wrote as my rebirth into poetry. And Dan Crocker was a huge fan of this one early on. And I was a little afraid to publish it. So it never got sent out, but it's in the book. Because it's, you know, this one goes back to my interest in talking about LGBT history and coming out. And while it was something that I wrote early on and needed to write, at the same time, you know, the personal aspect of it maybe is why I didn't send it out too much. So this one's called Patient Zero. Ask any educated lycanthropist, and they will tell you the one and only way to kill a werewolf is a single silver bullet. And so in turn, we expect all monstrosities, mythic or real, all multiplying mutations, benign or infectious, to originate from a single traceable point and arch toward a predictable end. In high school, the football coach taught us all the history classes, or health classes. Damn, I fucked up that line. Let's do that stanza again. In high school, the football coach taught us all the health classes. And though he used no anatomy charts, we learned everything from made-for-TV movies. Meredith Baxter made the tragedy of bulimia knowable in a way the science of a textbook never could. But when it came to sex ed, Coach broke into lecture. AIDS was caused by a bisexual doing it with a monkey. As an adult, I have heard the well-rehearsed monkey mythology. And though there are many ways man could have come in contact with a monkey's bodily fluids, we always return to sex, as if the disease had to be a punishment. Knowing no meaning to our suffering offers us no redemption. We fear the indifference of a virus as much as its symptoms. All mythologies need a villain. If the frustrated labor of scraping out a living on a hostile earth can be traced to a single woman picking forbidden fruit, then all the anxieties, shame, and tortured desires of the flesh can be blamed on the deviant rustling in the bushes. The villain had to be bisexual, not homo or hetero, not the devil you know or the devil you expect, but a shapeshifter. At 14, with my bleached hair and boy band pleather pants, and by the way, that is true because the late 90s were horrific, and that's exactly what I looked like. I felt implicated by this history, called to atone for these sins scrawled on the chalkboard. I was to blame for the fall of Rome, the erosion of America's family values, and the astonishing 761 show run of Starlight Express on Broadway. And that's true, I looked that up on Wikipedia. In college, I learned of the conspiracy theories. AIDS was concocted in a government lab to eradicate the gay rights movement, complete with apocryphal tales of Reagan rolling around on the Oval Office floor in laughter as the plague swept through. There had to be a cruel God's lightning bolts. Indifference and its absence of signification could not explain the body count. And I learned of the once established truths, now known to be fiction. Flight attendant Gaëtan Dugas, the patient zero myth, a one-man epidemic sowing the seeds of disease from layover to layover. There had to be a face, a Judas kiss framed by a 70s porn mustache, to vilify a protein structure. There had to be a name, the foreign French moaning unintelligibly through contorted Anglo mouths. There had to be a retribution for freely realizing his desire, a moment when his Air Canada plane flew too close to the sun. Despite every mapped genome, every millimeter of vaccine, every nuclear targeting of a cancer cell, every X-ray that shows us what's really inside, superstition still fires silver bullets into the dark. We are still afraid of getting it from a toilet seat, still dying of metaphor. Oh, and there's that line that I used earlier, dying of metaphor.
We all have to die from something.
That's how I would like to die. Maybe die from simile. He was like something and thus he died. But I'm glad that you brought up that poem, because it wouldn't have been one that I would have like put on my list to read, because I'm still a little like, I think maybe John, you can identify with this, and all the poets that are listening to me in the crowd. You've written something that you're still a little afraid of.
Oh, sure, that's true. One of the reasons why I brought up that poem too is one of the things that I think you do really well. That's probably, I don't know, a bit understated in this book, is you have a really good ability to bring in humor into a situation that is not necessarily humorous, like that I really enjoyed.
So right. This one, yeah, the AIDS epidemic isn't very funny, but apparently I found a few chuckles.
Yeah, you got a few zingers in there.
But you know that's
you're
right. Well, I wanted to bring up something because kind of tangentially related to this, because it's related to the theme of that poem, and I'm sitting here in my apartment and I'm talking to you, John. And also, you made that joke before we went live about Jeff Wine.
Oh yes.
And his amazing run on Card Sharks. I remember we had a conversation where I brought up that I wanted to write a poem about how the AIDS epidemic claimed so many lives of gay men that should be my mentors, should be the men that I look up to right now, that should have done great things, that should have elevated my generation and didn't because of the tragedy. And I said, I just didn't feel like I was a good enough writer. And you said, well, you will. So anyway, I am going to have to write that poem because I committed to write it for an academic anthology that's going to be published next year. So maybe one of the best things is to write a prospectus for something when you've had a few drinks. Be like, yeah, I can do this. You know, John Dorsey thinks I'm old enough now. But so yes, the poem that you said I will eventually be mature enough to write, I need to write by August 2021.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
and it goes back to that theme.
I think that you should write all of it, what's ever inside you. Now, whether or not you choose to show that to people, that's up to you. But I definitely, I've told younger poets this too. I'm like, just write the poem and then worry about it later, you know.
Right. Worry about whether or not it's the right time for it.
Yeah. Worry about whether you're going to be judged by it later. Because the harshest judgment you'll probably get is probably going to be from yourself.
Yeah.
At least we would hope so. I just, there are two more questions I wanted to ask. And then after I ask those, I'm going to have everyone turn their mics on and they can talk to you. Victor asked me today, though, whether or not you had copies of your book because he wanted to buy one from you directly. Do you have any?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a box of them right here.
Okay.
I got.
Sweet. There they are for everyone to buy. Just you see them there. You can buy them right now.
Yeah, Jason sent 35 of them to me.
Cut out the middleman.
There it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, and yeah, no, I'll gladly send copies to Victor or whoever asks me, because, okay, I'll send, Agnes has raised her hand, I'll send one to Agnes. Because I just want to, I'm just so tickled to have my book out and to have somebody like Jason, believe in it and put his effort into it. And so I'm happy to just mail out copies to whoever wants one. I'm very lucky to be in the position where I've, got this amazing job at College of the Canyons and amazing people that I work with. And, John, you've seen this, and Victor, is that a cat or a dog? I can't tell because your camera is very low resolution, but you've also seen College of the Canyons. So I'm in a wonderful position where, I've got a great job and, I can be like, yeah, I want to just share my love with her. Yeah, that's a cat.
Yeah, that's Victor's cat, Skittles.
That is a great name for a cat.
Dude, it's got like a pituitary problem or something.
No, Skittles.
It's huge.
Oh,
I mean, just the way Skittles is a great cat.
It's gigantic.
I'm hearing two different viewpoints on Skittles.
I've never met Skittles. I'm just looking right there for. Oh, there he is again.
I mean, just tonight, Jason figured out how to make a drink, but he has not met Skittles.
Oh, my drink.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. We're seeing about maybe 5 frames per minute of Skittles here, so it'd be a hasty judgment, but yeah, okay. So definitely Agnes and Victor, I'll send copies your way. But I think Paul wants one too, so I can send one there because I got plenty of them. They're actually sitting in the back of my car right now.
Chase, I wanted to ask you, why do you believe the pink flamingo is God's most majestic animal?
Well, that is definitely somebody who has spent time with me would definitely pick up for me, because I got my flamingo there and got my flamingo shirt here, and you always like to make reference to my flamingo shower curtain.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, no, there's flamingos everywhere. Well, definitely the flamingo I've adopted as my spirit animal. And I think the reason for the flamingo is that they're both majestic and flamboyant. By the way, the word for a group of flamingos is a flamboyance of flamingos.
Nice.
Huh, really?
Nice.
Wow.
Yes, a flamboyance of flamingos. So they are majestic, they are flamboyant, they are over the top, they are bright, they are brilliant, but they're also tough. They are strong. They're also very social. Like I love the fact that they hang out in groups and they go, one of my favorite photos ever taken was in 1992 when Hurricane Andrew came across Florida. The Miami Zoo was afraid, what are we going to do with our animals? And what they did was they put all the flamingos in a men's room. And then they took a picture because all the flamingos were looking at themselves in the mirrors in the men's room and looking at each other.
Huh.
So I like that aspect. It's both the reality of me being something that is flamboyant and colorful and over the top and yet strong and iconic, and also a little bit of aspiration that I want to be as social and part of a community as the flamingo is. So that's, you know, I also like the fact that a flamingo is not pink by birth. You earn your pink because they have to eat the crustaceans to turn pink.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, flamingo babies are gray.
Yeah, wow.
You
Things
grow
I never-
into your pink. Right, this book is full of animal facts. You will learn, like, you know, like step aside Jack Hanna from the Columbus Zoo, or God, that's a dated reference. Step aside Steve Irwin. That's also a dated reference. Who does Generation Z look at for animal information these days?
I don't know, but your references make me think all my life I've never known that I'm still a gray flamingo.
You gotta start eating marsh crustaceans in a lagoon.
I do. Yeah, that's really the question I wanted to ask you. Normally, I have a much harder question, but your love of flamingos.
Well, I mean, I think we all have animals that speak to us.
I think so. I think so.
What's your spirit animal, John?
My spirit animal. You know, that's a good question. I love dogs. You put me around any dog, I fall in love with it. But even though I would also eat the spirit animal, I think perhaps a pig, you know, even though I love bacon, I love the pig.
I can see that. One of my favorite pieces of art of a flamingo is the drawing that James Audubon did back in the early 1800s. You know, it's the iconic, the head's kind of dipped down like this. In fact, I remember when I was working with Jason on the book, and he wanted a piece for the frontispiece of my book, and I directed him to an archive of vintage flamingo drawings, and I said, you can do all of them except the Audubon one, because that one was already done for a book that was already done for an LGBT themed book that was really big this summer. Mostly Dead Things by Kristen Arnett, which is a fantastic novel. But so with that, you know, there's one of the things I learned about Audubon is that he ate every bird that he drew.
I mean, that's fair.
So Audubon knows what a flamingo tastes like.
So did Jason surprise you with his pre-existing knowledge of flamingos?
Does that count as a pre-existing condition, and thus knowledge of flamingos will not be covered if Donald Trump wins this Supreme Court case?
No, not in the least.
Yeah, in the debates, President Trump said he was going to cover pre-existing knowledge of flamingos, but I don't know.
You can't trust him.
But that particular one, but a lot of the birds also. I spent a lot of time on that website. It was fascinating, and
it's a great website.
I've been on there for my own purposes as well, but it was nice to go back there for somebody else's. But like I remember picking that one, and I was just thinking, you know, the only thing he's missing is like a little rakishly angled top hat and like a monocle, you know,
yes.
And like maybe some spats down there. You know, he's very aristocratic. You know,
I feel like all flamingos kind of have that vibe. But you're right. He could do some Mr. Peanut cosplay.
Chase,
Yeah, actually, this one works really well because I've sent out some copies, and to make them special, I've drawn a speech bubble.
there you go.
Yeah, because when you autograph copies, you want to make them special. So because he looks like he's talking.
Now, Chase, I was just going to ask you, do you want to, as far as poems go, I wanted to know if you want to read one more poem to close this out, and then I'm going to have everyone turn off their microphones.
Sure. Let's see. One more. Okay. All right, one more to close us out so that we can get more of the zoo in here. And this one's a good sweet spot because it's both about animals. It's also a little family personal because the title is based on a joke my grandmother told in the early 70s that still gets mentioned today. And so this one is called Your Mother Doesn't Want You Wasting Color Film on Zebras, which is something my grandma told to my dad when she took him to the LA Zoo. Because it would be like, 1973, and color film was expensive back then. So if you're going to take pictures of a zebra, use black and white because you're just wasting our money. So yeah, your mother doesn't want you wasting color film on zebras. Feel free to spend your film on boulders mistaken for Galapagos tortoises, the fleshly eclipse of a thumb obscuring a monkey, the anonymous neck of a giraffe decapitated by the viewfinder, or the pigeons pecking your trail of dropped popcorn, even though we can see them from the corner park for free. Color film is for the pink haze of a flamingo across the lagoon in a distant flamboyance, the captured yawn of a tiger remembered as a roar. But most of all, do not waste your color film on zebras. They live in an impossible world of black and white, contrast, defined binaries and geometries. A baby zebra imprints on her mother's stripes, memorizes the pattern, follows its map for life across the dusty savanna. Zookeepers can copy the stripes, paint them on t-shirts, and lead the baby zebra anywhere by the gravity of instinct. Do not trace the familiarity of my veins when you should be scribbling off the paper. Zebras are born with a predestined ending, always after the xylophone or X-ray. They know their place in the taxonomy of all living beings, but it comes at the price of accepting they're the untouched page in the coloring book.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Chase, and thank you for doing this tonight. I want to remind everyone. No, it's been a lot of fun. I want to remind everyone just that we are. This is OAC Books Presents, and we are at Osage Arts Community, and I try to do a little plug for them, and just let people know that they are an artist residency program here in Southern Missouri that offers space to artists from a period of 1 week to 1 year generally. And they can be found on Facebook if anyone is interested, and I'm sure they'll get you an application. And beyond that, it's wonderful to do this, and it keeps getting better every time. And I'm actually starting to get comfortable with it, which is great. And I want to thank everybody who stuck with us today. And no one left, and I appreciate that. If you guys want to turn on your microphones and talk to Chase, if you can either hit him up on Facebook, or if you want to put your addresses in the chat window in terms of him to send a book to you, or however you want to go about that, you can go ahead and do that. So
I'm
if everyone,
Facebook friends with everybody that I see right now, so that's pretty easy.
well, yeah, hopefully, I'm hoping that some people that see this on YouTube, which I will upload it to, and I'll also upload it to the Art Center YouTube page. I'm hoping that some people will contact you about picking up a copy of your book.
Sure.
And I would just tell them the best way to do that probably would be to reach out to you on Facebook via Messenger and just exchange details.
Sure. Yeah.
And now Victor has gone away completely. I think Skittles ate him because I don't see either of them, and I don't see his camera either.
Well, that just gives me good material for a sequel.
You're not on?
Oh no! Now I hear Victor.
Okay,
We can't
I just
see
don't,
you.
yeah, we
Hey,
just can't see your camera, Victor.
Yeah, you're a black void.
I'm in the spirit of
They're
Victor
not
Clevenger.
showing?
How do I know that's Victor and not Skittles after eating Victor being able to mimic his voice?
Yeah, that's
Skittles is
interesting. No.
Skittles is currently wearing Victor's body as a suit.
Yes. Yeah, he has Victor's face over his face. And he's going to now live Victor's life as Victor.
It's true. He'll have to do like the nicotine pills or whatever, and drive around in Victor's car.
Will he glow when he's near radiation like Victor does?
That's right.
Yeah, we just got to get a Geiger counter.
I have a random animal fact I was going to share with you all quickly after John said his spirit guide animal was a pig. The great poet Lily Penhall and I met the night I was coming to live in Dallas. She was leaving Dallas. And of course, we talked about the refractory period of the male pig and how their moment of issuance or little death can sometimes be up to like 8 or 9 minutes long. And she said, without missing a beat, oh, that's why bacon tastes so good. And then put that in a poem. So I thought I'd share that. If you were a pig, John, you'd definitely be happy in those moments.
Yeah, I like the pig because, they're slow and sort of lethargic, and they don't let anyone tell them what to do. So, and they are delicious.
Yeah.
They are delicious, John.
It does make you wonder about Smithfield's slaughtering methods and how they make them taste so good.
I currently have some Smithfield meat in my mini fridge, and I don't know how they do it.
Well, apparently that's why they don't film the pig below belly.
No, we don't need to see that.
It's what makes it taste so good.
Yeah, I can't comment on bacon because I don't eat bacon, but I wanted to say that I enjoyed your poems, and they're not only like good poems, but they're also fun poems. So this is stuff that is fun to listen to, and I love the sense of humor that you put in. So I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I stayed awake much later than I thought I could. So no, I'm looking forward to your book.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Agnes. And I'm glad that you saw that there was fun in this, because one of my worries about this book was that it was a little bit of a downer. There's a lot of dead animals.
Yeah, but the way, just like the poem that you read about the burial, that first line is already brilliant. Like, you saw the burial of 2 dogs and 3 cats and Ronald Reagan, or 1 president. It's just great. And even though that is about the dogs, it's not sad. It's just, yeah, it's these little bits. And the thing about Marco Polo and the unicorn, that unicorn poem, I love that. That is beautiful. And it's just, and also what I really enjoyed about this, that you picked all those you names that are like the nod. It's just such a fun idea to run and play with that. So it's very whimsical and it's very, yeah, I had a blast listening to you.
I'm glad you picked that up. There is a website that lists all the animals alphabetically. So I consulted it to look for animals that begin with U. And there aren't a lot of them. And there aren't a lot of them that are specifically just a U word. Like a lot of them are the uns. And what I realized is that so many of these animals, these species, were the un this and the un that. And that there were other versions of that animal that were the that. So the unstriped meant that there was a striped one. And I thought, man, you exist in the world. And how long has a species been there? Maybe thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years. Like they saw dinosaurs. And yet when people come around, they're like, oh, you're the unspotted one. So you're now defined by the fact that you're not as good as another thing that you've never seen. And like, that's a kind of crappy moniker to have for a species.
I don't know what your status is at your college. I'm a college teacher as well, and I am not tenured. And all the not tenured faculty, they go by the abbreviation NTT. We are all collectively labeled by what we are not. So I kind of feel like the unspotted whatever it was.
Well, and Agnes, I have been that, because when I taught at Southeast Missouri State, I was an NTT. So I had your exact job designation from 2014 to 2016 when I was there at SEMO with...
That's where you met Daniel?
Where I met Dan. He was one of my colleagues. And so, I have a tenure review meeting next week, so let's hope things go well. But yeah, I totally get that. And that's, that was one of the problems with being in Missouri, was this weird sense of, well, you're non-tenure track. Yeah, so defined by what you aren't. Well, and that's a hard thing to be defined by.
It doesn't really bother me, but I was reminded of it when I heard you read that list of animals that are defined by what they were, and I didn't realize it. It just clicked a little later. That's okay. Yeah, that's kind of me, and I think it's really funny.
Well, and that's awesome, because that's exactly what poetry should do, right? It should connect to other people in ways that I could not even predict. That you are identifying with that poor unadorned rock wallaby. That I'm feeling that way. The bureaucracy of the Missouri state education system has made me feel like that poor rock wallaby who is not adorned and will always feel inferior to the rock wallaby who is adorned.
Chase, I just want to say, I don't know what you're talking about on one end. Your book is uplifting. I didn't find it, I actually being serious, I did not find your book depressing at any point.
That's really good to know, because I can never tell if I'm being uplifting or depressing. Because some of the things that I find uplifting, other people are like depressed by. Like when I'm doing a class lecture on existentialism, because I love to do the existentialists in class. And I say that, they talk about the fact that we're all going to die eventually, and that life is inherently meaningless. And that's what's uplifting about existentialism to me. None of this matters, and that's what should empower you. Students, that's not what they're used to hearing. But to me, that's uplifting, because it means that I have the power to define meaning and to find the purpose of being alive for my own self. That's empowering. So yeah, so I never know if what I find empowering and uplifting isn't what people find depressing and discouraging.
Well, I'll say this. It's hard for me anymore, and I have to admit this. A lot of times I'll go through a book and I'll randomly pick out pieces, but I can't sit there from beginning to end. It's part of our like culture of like I don't know, where our attention span has gotten so bad over the years. But your book I read from front to back, and it really,
Wow.
really was one of the most enjoyable books that I've picked up in quite a while.
Wow, that's amazingly high praise. Like, I was, I'll reveal some personal stuff about myself because that's the point of reading your poetry. So I was on a date earlier today, socially distanced, masks outside, we're being safe. But I brought up the fact that I was doing this podcast, and I said that, you know, at some point in the future, like it's going to be 2055, and I'm going to be an old guy in some coffee shop. Let's see, I'll be 70. So some some coffee shop in Palm Springs. Let's hope, because my life is going well and I've retired where I want to retire. So I'm in Palm Springs, and there's some like crusty punk hipsters hanging out, and they're going to bring up, yeah, I got a vintage John Dorsey book. And I'm going to say, John Dorsey slept on my couch in 2019. And people are going to think those punks are going to think I'm cool.
Well, let's hope that you are 70 years old and living on a flamingo ranch
In Palm Springs.
That's right.
It's entirely possible.
That's my dream for you as well. I want you surrounded by flamingos.
You know, flamingos produce pink milk.
I did not. Like every day would be like
Milk?
Strawberry Quick.
They produce milk?
Yes. Well, it's not mammary milk, but they have a something in their throat that allows them to produce nutrient-rich liquid that they can then feed to their chicks.
Yeah.
So that it's not going to taste like Strawberry Quick. It's going to taste like old crabs. So
Well,
if you want old crab milk,
you can't have everything. So,
but that's how the chicks start turning pink.
Okay.
So
Well,
if you want to turn pink, drink your old crab milk.
All right. Well, I've learned a lot today. I didn't know very much about flamingos, I have to be honest. But all right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here just because it's getting late for everybody.
All right.
I want to thank Chase for doing this. It's great to talk to you, Chase.
Oh, it's awesome. I enjoy every time we can chat and talk about poetry and support each other. That's awesome.
Well, we'll have to do it sometime where there isn't like a podcast involved. Although I'll admit this is a good excuse just to talk to you, which I enjoy. So
absolutely, any excuse.
Yeah. But yeah, Victor and I both said we want to get back out there. So as soon as it's safe to do it, we'll come watch the Game Show Network with you.
Absolutely, you guys have a eternally standing invitation to sleep on my couch and watch the Game Show Network. And I'm on the property market, so I might actually have a proper place for you to sleep in the future instead of just my living room / kitchen area.
Oh, Chase, don't spoil me. I was fine right where I was. So it's just good to see you. It's good to hear your voice. I'm gonna say goodnight to everyone here. I love you guys. Paulie, I'll see you soon too, brother. I love you. All right. You guys have a good night.
All right. Thank you again.
Good
This
night,
has been a lot of
everybody. It
fun.
was good to see you all.
Bye.
Thanks, Chase. Bye, Agnes.
Thanks,
Bye.
Paul. Thanks, Agnes. Thanks, Victor. Thanks, John. And thanks, Jason.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.